an absolute joy to see all these faces and all of you here today. It's a really exciting sort of occasion, and it's a delight for Dress for Success to have this opportunity to be able to welcome Hilary Barry, who's our ambassador, and it's like a privilege for us to have this opportunity for her to be with us. So, are we excited? Yeah. Yes, fantastic.
E kororo timatanga māku, kia wehi kia I hoa te whakaaro nui. Te tapunga mai o tōna mai I te rangi, ta tūnoa ki te whenua ka kātau I tēnei rā. Nō reira, te hei mōri ora. I ngā mātau waka e tau nei, e ngā hui ngā tangata, e ngā reo kōrero, e au kuranga tira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou. Tēnā koutou, kua tai mai, I roto I te kaupapa tēnei wā, ko te whakatau, mai, o te kōwhaia, ko te kōwhaia o te pauaka whakata, ko TV1, ko tai mai I roto I tēnei kaupapa. Nō reira, nau mai, hara mai, whakatau mai. Ah, come forth. Te kōwhaia, tēnā koe.
Thank you so much.
Ah, ho mai te paki.
For having me and for such a beautiful, heartfelt welcome. It's so lovely to be here and to see you all. And I know everybody wants to know what to do. Blah, blah, blah. So I don't have a great story on the broken ankle, which is very disappointing. A girlfriend of mine said I really did need to make up a better story about how I was drunk and dancing on tabletops. But unfortunately I wasn't. I was just walking down the road at night on an uneven footpath, slipped, wasn't even in high heels, and sort of rolled my ankle and broke it. Anyway, I did such a good job. I'm in this cast for another month and I'm not allowed to put any weight on it, so that's a bit of a nuisance. So I hope everybody can kind of see me, because I am going to have to sit down, but just shuffle your chairs, so we can close in a little bit. Shuffle your chairs so you can see me and we can, have a chat about stuff. So I'll just put myself down. Here we go. And the guys here have been so good, getting me a little thank you. Just get my bits and pieces. So how is everybody today?
Yeah.
Thank you. And we're talking about presenting our best selves. And I've got a question for you, because as I hobbled up here, I thought I'd ask you this. Do you think today I've presented my best self? Hands up who thinks I've presented my best self today. Good on you. And I agree, because part of presenting your best self is being who you are. So who I am is some crazy old tart who broke her ankle, ended up in a cast and just hobbled in front of everybody. And you know what? That is absolutely part, I think, of being your best self. It's being who you are. It's not pretending to be someone else. It's being who you are and being authentic, and a couple of other things too, which I'm going to suggest to you guys today. Things that I do to present my best self, because we're talking today about presenting your best self in terms of getting work, getting a job, getting a promotion, those sorts of things. But a lot of the techniques that you will need to do that, I use in my everyday life on TV, presenting my best self. Because in actual fact, the real Hilary Barry, with a broken ankle, spends a lot of the day in track pants. And she certainly doesn't put on makeup, and she, shuffles up and down stairs on her knees to get up the top, and then I bum shuffle to get back down. Now, that's not a part of my life at the moment that I would share with people on the TV. Equally, it's probably not something, if we take that sort of metaphor, that I would share with a potential employer. I present my best self. And it's kind of like, when we think about presenting our best selves, I think there are
are times that we do that. We do that for job interviews. When else do we do it? We do it for first dates and second dates and third dates. We probably do it when we meet the in-laws for probably the first year. But there are lots of occasions when we want to present our best selves. And like I say, it's not about pretending to be someone else. It's just accentuating the positive about you. And I think a lot of it has to do with inner confidence. And that's a hard thing. It's a hard thing to have and to get. And we all get nervous and lose our inner confidence, even me. I mean, this time last week, no, 10 days ago, I had to interview Hilary Clinton. And I had this cast, and I was worried about it because, I was nervous about interviewing her because she's one of the most powerful women in the world. So I had those nerves, which I'd get anyway. Then I had the nerves of not being the way I normally am, having to deal with this, crutches, and just the ins and outs of actually having an interview with her while being like this and not feeling like myself. And so that made me nervous as well. So I had the normal nerves you would get doing an interview like that. Then I had the nerves about, oh my gosh, this is embarrassing, and it's just, what an idiot I am, fancy doing this before a really big moment in my career. And then I just gave myself an uppercut and I said, she's just a real person, kind of. You know what I mean, though. She came into this world like the rest of us, and you're just a real person who's a little bit too real sometimes. So just treat it like that. She's a person, you're a person. No, you're equals. And I think even if you don't feel like that when you are in a situation of going to a job interview, just keep those thought processes going, which is, this is just a person. This person who, I scored the job interview. I mean, that's fantastic. I deserve this job because you've given me an interview, so you must think I do as well. But it's having in your mind, cutting out that self-doubt and having in your mind, I deserve to be here, and this person who's asking me these questions is my equal. It goes both ways. The other thing too is, with confidence, a lot of it is faking it till you make it. You hear that phrase quite a bit. Well, it's absolutely true. I am naturally probably quite a confident person, but I do have times where I don't feel confident at all, that my confidence is knocked, and that I kind of have these voices in my head saying, oh, honestly, God, you could have done that better. Oh, you're useless. None of us is immune to that. Hillary Clinton probably feels that too. I mean, she lost the election to Donald Trump. She's got those voices in her head. She doesn't share that she has got those voices in her head, because you know what? That's part of confidence. It's kind of blocking out the negativity and going, right, I got this. So I'm talking about, I wrote down a couple of notes. Don't worry, I'm not going to bore you by reading your speech, but I did think about the different things that make up this concept of best self. Does anyone have any ideas about what sort of things make you your best self? I've talked about confidence. I've talked in my case today about getting out of my sweatpants and putting on some makeup. But again, makeup, those sorts of things aren't necessarily what make you your best self either. But sometimes for me that makes me feel good, like I've kind of got dressed, I'm ready for the day, I'm feeling confident. But has anybody got any other ideas about what sort of things you want to accentuate when you talk about being your best self?
You focus on your positives rather than your weaknesses.
Absolutely. And in the sense of going for a job interview, that's so, so true. Because sometimes it's quite a common question for a potential employer to say, what are your weaknesses? And often it's good to think about an answer to that and make it sound like one of your positives is a weakness. I remember being in a job interview and someone said to me, well, what are your weaknesses? And I said, oh, look, I'm a perfectionist. So that can be a problem because with journalists, we work to deadline. And if you're a perfectionist, there's a point at which you actually have to let it go. Otherwise, it's not going to make it to air. But it still kind of sounded like it was a positive because if you're a perfectionist, you want to get things right. So that's absolutely one of the things that you should keep in mind. What else did I put down here? The confidence, absolutely. And the visualizations, I can't underestimate that. I do that a lot when I'm feeling vulnerable and not confident. You've got this, you're okay. I'm a great one for saying to myself, what's the worst that can happen? Now that's not going to work for everybody. Because some people will go, oh my God, the worst that can happen is da-da-da-da-da. But, you know, often I find that is my inner monologue. When I'm feeling nervous or not confident, I go, what's the worst that can happen? Hilary Clinton thinks I'm an idiot and walks out of the interview. It's pre-recorded. I just won't play that. You know, no one but the cameraman and I will know that happened. You know, that's the worst that can happen. That's still not too bad. Sometimes I think too that when you go into a job interview, you can feel like the interview process is daunting. Because if you're a naturally shy person, you're essentially having to make conversation with someone for what might be, I guess, what would the average time of a job interview be? Half an hour? Maybe even a bit longer? And that's daunting, isn't it? To make conversation with a complete stranger. They're the expert in the field, you're not. So how do you cope with that? And I think that planning ahead is a really good one too. Particularly if you want a particular job, just doing a little bit of a research on what the company is. Excuse me. Oh, who would have thought that the one having the coughing fit would be me? I can't remove myself, I've got to stay. So just a little bit of research, and you don't have to be an expert, but it's just finding maybe a couple of little conversation starters that you could throw into that interview process that would make it seem like you took an interest, but also that you're genuinely interested in the business that they do. So that's a good one too. And again, I find going into social situations quite nerve-wracking too sometimes. And, you know, when you're trying to keep conversation going with people you don't know, that can be quite challenging. It's finding, you know, common ground and things that you can talk about. And often I'm thinking about, you know, where the conversation might lead, or as they're talking I might think, okay, I'm going to ask them about this next or this next. So that is kind of a skill that's good to train yourself in, and all it takes is preparation, because, you know, it feeds into that confidence thing. If an employer gets the sense that you are confident, that you can make conversation, that you can ask questions that might be relevant or interesting, then those are all going to be ticks in your favour as well. And, you know, just the simple things too. And again, it's part of this faking it till you make it. Walking in, head high, eye contact. It's all the sorts of things that I tell people who are training to become TV presenters too. You know, we're looking into the camera as if that's the interviewer in a job situation, or that's a very kindly aunt. In fact, the best advice I give to newsreaders and news presenters, I say to them, well, that camera, you imagine that camera is a dear old elderly aunt or a dear old nana. So everybody's got that person in their lives where they go, the dear old thing, slightly hard of hearing, so make sure you speak clearly. But when you're in a job interview, imagine the person is actually a dear, older, respected member of your family. So, you know, your nana says, sit up straight, girl. Okay. Speak clearly, I can't hear you. So all of those things, and you sort of naturally, because they're old and gorgeous and crusty, you kind of have that warmth on your face, and you feel care and concern for them too. So that's quite a good analogy when you're trying to present your best self. Think of, in our case for television presenting, the camera being that person. And when you're in a job interview, that's probably not a bad idea in terms of the way you want to project yourself. So you're speaking clearly because they're a bit short of hearing, but they're a kind person and one that you're going to show warmth to as well. The other thing that is a barrier, I think, to presenting your best self, nerves. Who feels nerves when they go into those sorts of situations? We all do, eh? Yeah, everybody does. And there's no way of getting rid of them. That's the bad news. The good news is, though, there are techniques that you can use to calm them a little bit. So breathing is a really, really good one, because what do we do when we get nervous? We get kind of agitated, and we're breathing fast. We're not taking in, quality air. We're breathing fast. We're getting a little bit shaky. And so if we just take a conscious sort of moment to take deep breaths and calm ourselves and centre ourselves, it's a wonderful way of just calming down. Because one thing I do when I'm nervous, I talk like this, and I just rabbit on about nothing, and I just fill the empty space with absolutely nothing. And in a job interview, nobody wants that. They don't want me sitting there rabbiting on like this. They want me to calm down, lower my heart rate, calm the nerves, and speak a little bit slower, and with a bit more mindfulness. Because that's often something that happens in job interviews too, huh? You get asked questions and you just blurt out an answer because you're nervous and you want to seem like you're really keen, and then you kick yourself because you go, that was a really stupid answer. What did I say that for? Why did I say that? Because you felt nervous and you just want to get something out. So if you just calm yourself down a little bit before the questions start, then you can take a moment to think about the answer and think about the question. Listen to the question, because if I was interviewing someone for a job and they took a moment to think about my question, I wouldn't think they were stupid. I would actually think that they were quite thoughtful and that they actually were thinking deeply about their response to the question. So take your time. It's a very easy thing for me to say. It's quite a hard thing to take your time when you're feeling the adrenaline and the nerves and things like that. But when you do, even like I am now talking to you, I'm nervous talking to you now. And look, I've got all these beautiful friendly faces in front of me. I've had a lovely welcome, but I feel nervous. So I'm actually using those techniques now. I'm taking a breath between my sentences. I'm talking quite slowly while I think of, I'm keeping up with that train of thought. But those are techniques that I use in my work life, but also when I'm talking to groups of people, because I'm not immune from feeling it too. Don't ever think you're the only one who gets consumed by nerves and self-doubt, because we all do, even Hilary Clinton. Right, now let me have a little look at my notes too. So, listening to the question, I thought that was a good one. The other thing that I think is important to being your true self, your best self, is to be honest. If you're asked a question in a job interview, but don't necessarily give them the answer you think they want to hear. Let's be honest, there'll be occasions when you do. But as a general rule, be honest. Don't be too frank, but be honest and be open, because you might be telling them things either about yourself or your perception of their business that they haven't heard before, and that might be quite interesting, because a lot of people will play it very, very safe and probably will not be as honest. But I think being your best self is being honest as well in your answers. looking the interviewer in the eye, doing all those things. The other one that is a tough one, isn't it, is pretending to know stuff that you don't know. Commonly known as bullshit. So, and I've done it. Because, when you're interviewing someone on live TV and they go down a path and you go, I have no idea what they're talking about, I have to fake it. I can't, Anyway, so, but in a job interview, it's problematic, isn't it? Because if you can get away with it once, but if they go down a path where you really don't have any idea what they're talking about, it's not going to end well. So it's as a rule for a job interview, it's probably best not to pretend to know stuff that you don't. So be honest with that sort of stuff too. But if you're interviewing someone live on TV, all bets are off. You go for it. So I think the biggest things, confidence. Be yourself. Don't try and be anyone else. But like a first date, possibly don't reveal everything about yourself. I mean, it's so obvious, isn't it? Think of it as a first date. I think that's quite a good analogy. You are warm, you're kind, you're not going to pick up the phone and yell at your kids during the date / interview. All those sorts of things. Actually, speaking of phones, you know the drill. I mean, obviously, just turn them off is probably the best policy. But do you guys talk about social media and stuff like that in terms of employment and because more and more that's something that employers can check up on and it's a tough one and I think that particularly if you're in the job market, it probably pays to look at your social media and just play it safe. It doesn't mean you can't have an opinion on things, and nobody would ever want you to, but it's just kind of probably cleaning out the stuff that you wouldn't want strangers seeing. And sometimes I think of social media as a live microphone on a talkback show, and it's a good way of looking at social media. So would you be happy to say this live on air on News Talk ZB, this particular opinion, and have other people hear it? If that's the case, go for it. If it's something that you think, maybe that's not fit for public consumption, then probably don't do it. Or if it's already out there, just get rid of it off your Facebook page or your Twitter feed or stuff like that. I've done it myself. Tweeted something and then gone, actually, that's not a great idea. Delete. Just mitigate the damage, because it's so easy to put it out there, but once it goes viral, you can't dial it back. So in the 10 minutes after you post something that you think you oughtn't, get rid of it. Yeah, probably the best policy. So that's my kind of take on what presenting your best self is. You might have some other thoughts. And this is not me just lecturing you guys. I'd love your feedback and your ideas. And I know that we've got we've got some questions that have trickled their way through already, because I hear some of you are a bit shy. But I want you to feel free to ask me anything. And we'll stick with presenting your best self right now, but there might be other questions you want to know. Even the goss. Yes?
Gesturing, like what you're doing with your hands, and emphasis. Making bullet points at the end of your
Yeah. I don't even realise I'm doing it. I probably do it too much. And you can be frank. I probably do it too much. Using your hands is actually a very handy way of getting your brain working. So psychologists have discovered that we use our hands a lot, yes, to make a point, like I just did then, but also when we're trying to formulate our thoughts, it's our body's way of helping our brain get into gear and answer a question. So don't be shy about using your hands, but maybe I probably do it too much.
What about body language?
Great question. Body language is a really interesting one. And there are things that cut people off in terms of body language, and there are things that open them up. So crossing your arms is comfortable. And you know what? You were crossing your arms, and that's a comfortable position and a perfectly perfect position in this setting. But crossing your arms in a job interview immediately makes it look like you're not interested and that you possibly don't want to be there. Yeah. So definitely not crossing your arms. I mean, there'll be certain if I was going for an interview at the New Zealand Army, I wouldn't cross my legs either. You know, there are certain situations where, depending on the job, if it's a super formal job, you were going for a job at Government House or the Army or some of those super uptight settings, where I'd probably not cross my legs, have my hands on my lap, be on my best behaviour in that sense. But I think in most job interviews, you want to be relaxed. And being relaxed is crossing your legs and, you know, it's probably not lounging over the chair. It's making eye contact. And that can be hard sometimes. And look, when, again, like the hands, like you're mentioning with the hands, when you're answering a question, your eyes will go everywhere. And you can't stop yourself from doing that, and you shouldn't, because that's, again, part of your brain's thought process. Your eyes wander off as you're sort of thinking of these different things you might say. But when the person's asking you a question, it's looking them in the eye. Hands up, everybody's got bitchy resting face? Yeah. Okay, so that's a thing. And when I'm on the TV, I have to be a bit careful, because when I'm in my natural kind of... it's not nice. Is it? I mean, you're not going to go, oh, she's warm and inviting. And you don't feel perfectly relaxed. So, you know, again, when you're in a job interview, when you're on TV, it's knowing things about yourself and kind of just trying to mitigate the damage that causes. So when I'm on TV, I try and keep my eyebrows up a bit. It's not kind of a cheesy smile, but it's kind of like, again, talking to that lovely, dear, elderly Nana. It's kind of like, Nana, da-la-la-la. So that's kind of the look that I try and keep on my face when I'm on the TV or if I'm in a job interview. Because lots of us have bitchy resting face. And it's not a crime. It's just, sometimes it just doesn't help. But what else? Anybody else got any ideas on body language that doesn't really work when you're going for a job interview?
Yawning.
Okay, that's a great tip. Definitely don't yawn. And if you're not well, don't go to a job interview if you're if you're not well. Because, I don't think that's a great look either. Nobody wants that. Nobody wants to shake the hand of somebody who's been blowing their nose and coughing. Anyone else? Body language that we should avoid?
Being jittery.
Yeah? Yes. Yeah. And that is a natural thing when you're nervous, right? So it's taking those deep breaths, trying to slow everything down. You probably still will have sweaty palms and be shaking a little bit, but even on the outside, if you appear to be calm, taking it slower, and it will feel slow to you. When you've got that adrenaline going, you'll think, oh my goodness, this person is going to think I actually am slow. But you're not. You won't come across like that at all. It just will be that natural slowing down of your whole body process. Any other questions?
I think for me, it comes down to preparing and adding in that extra time so that I'm relaxed going in.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. So that's a really good point you make. I'm just going to repeat that because I'm the one with the microphone. So preparing before an interview and also getting there early enough that you can calm the nerves and just be in that right space. Yeah, that's a really, really good idea, because particularly in Auckland, the last thing you want is to race in there. You're hot and sweaty anyway, then you're nervous, then you're jittery. Disaster. How do you go into an interview if you've got a disability but you know you can do the job. With confidence, because, you know, there is legislation in place that means that you should not be put at any disadvantage. If you are capable of doing a job and you have a disability, you absolutely should be entitled to that job. So, I mean, I haven't had experience of that myself, of course, but there are, if anybody feels that they have not had that opportunity, there are legal avenues to take to, make sure that does not happen, because it shouldn't. We all know that, don't we?
Absolutely. In some situations like that, for instance, Hilary, would it be wise to, you say you don't tell your whole story, but if there was something that, would you say that they might share a situation, it could be about a disability if it wasn't obvious, but speak to it, so it's almost like they're aware that that's there?
Look,
so that,
I would.
Right.
I would, but that's personal. I mean, if it's something that absolutely doesn't affect your work and isn't likely to, then I wouldn't feel under any obligation to share that. It would very much depend on the job, on the sort of job it was, and how badly you wanted it. And I guess on the rapport, you might be at your third interview at that stage, and maybe you feel, that is something that you would like to share with the person. But it would be completely up to you whether you wanted to or not. Yeah. Any other questions?
Criminal convictions, would you declare them?
What's the legal situation there?
I think if they ask you, you have to.
Yeah. So I'd only answer if they asked me. I'd follow the letter of the law and no more. Yeah. I don't know. That's a good question. Okay. So apparently under the law, if an employer asks you if you have criminal convictions, you must answer honestly. But if they don't ask, you don't have to answer. So if they don't ask, who would share? Yeah, neither would I. That's a good curly question. Okay. This is a question that someone has posed. How important is it what other people think or say about you? That is a good question. So, there are some people in all of our lives that it matters a great deal what they think or say about us. For me, it's my mum, my husband, my kids, probably a couple of my closest confidants at work, a couple of my closest friends. Okay, so I'm under 10. So that's for me, let's say it's 10. So that's 10 people in my life who I care what they think or say about me. I care very much. And if they say, you're a bitch, that you were out of line, I go, shivers, okay, I must have been. Outside of those 10 people, I don't care. Not everyone in the world has the right to have an opinion on you or influence how you feel about yourself. So my advice is that when you come to taking offence at things that other people say about you or think about you, think about whether their opinion matters to you. Because if their opinion doesn't matter to you, you should not be wasting your time worrying about it. So doing the job I do, I get a lot of criticism. I get a lot of lovely feedback, and that's really, really lovely. But again, often it's from people you don't know, so, you don't want to get a big head about it. But equally, you get some awful feedback, some terrible feedback. Does it hurt? I wouldn't even say it hurts. Do you kind of go, ugh, sometimes at how mean people can be? Yes. But then you centre yourself again by going, whose opinion do I care about? Did my mum say that about me? Did my husband say that about me? Heaven forbid, does one of my kids think that about me? And if the answer's no, don't waste your energy. Yeah. Because it's easy to get caught up, particularly in this world with social media, on, everyone having an opinion, and I hate that. Everybody throws out, I hate that, and I love that. So I hate that. I hate that. That's the thing that cracks me up when people, put opinions online and they go, oh, I hate Hilary, Barry. I go, oh, God, you don't even know me. How could you possibly hate, whatever. But that's my advice. That's my advice. Okay. Why do you think you've been successful? Well, this is a funny question, isn't it? Because I don't even think of myself as successful. It's funny, isn't it? I think I've been lucky. I think I really love what I do. Successful. It's funny. I think if you're happy, you're successful. I think, actually, and that brings me back to presenting your best self. When you think about that concept of best self, you like yourself. You kind of go, this is the person I want to be. Hey, and we all have parts of our personality that are not the best. Yeah. But when you are concentrating on being the best that you can be and being the best person you can be and kind and empathetic and all the things that we strive to be, you feel really good about yourself, don't you? You like yourself. And I think that probably my definition of being successful would be being happy and feeling that way about yourself. That's a work in progress for everyone, isn't it? It's funny, because that's a lovely question, because whoever's posed it thinks I've been successful, and that's really nice. And I don't think of myself that way. When was the last job interview you went to, and how did you prepare for it? That was a long time ago. The last job interview I had was probably 25 years ago. I know, because I kind of got into a kind of industry where people tap you on the shoulder to do other things. So my last job interview was to get my job at TV3. So I'd been working in radio, and I was working in Masterton, and I was 23. And I loved my time in Masterton. Great fun living in a small town, great people, had some great times working in a radio station too, because when it's a really small radio station and I was the only journalist, I got all the big stories and all the big breaks, so that was great. But I needed to move on. So I actually applied for a job at TVNZ with Fair Go, which was still around way back then. It's been around for donkeys. Anyway, didn't get the job, but because I was far too young, mainly, and they were after a bloke. Because the funny thing is, do you know what the funny thing is? As I say that, it sounds so sexist. And I'm not kind of justifying it, but they had too many women on the show as presenters. And they only had one other bloke. So when they hired a bloke, I kind of understood, they needed more blokes because they had too many women. How many industries can you say that about? Anywho, so I didn't get the job, but they were really lovely. And the guy who I'd done the audition for sent me 2 videotapes, VHS tapes in those days, and said, look, send this one to the news person at TVNZ and this one to the head of news at TV3. So I did. And anyway, TVNZ wrote me a letter going, thanks so much, see you later. Their loss, as it turns out. And TV3 said, oh, we've got a job in Christchurch. So I then had to go for an interview before I got the job to go in Christchurch. Anyway, so the problem was that living in Masterton, we had no TV3 coverage. You know that whole stuff I just said earlier on about being honest? So So anyway, this is a rare occurrence where I got away with telling a lie. Because during the course of the interview with the guy who was the head of the newsroom in Christchurch and the head of TV3 News, 3 national news as it was in those days, so there's 2 bigwigs in the office, they both asked me whether I watched 3 News. And I lied through my teeth and said, yes, it's the only news I watch. Which clearly was a big, fat, giant lie because we didn't even have TV3 reception. And if they'd taken it a step further, they would have known that we didn't have TV3 reception in Masterton. So either they knew that and thought it was funny that I'd lied, or they didn't realise it and I got away with it. But luckily they didn't say, oh, what did you think of the news bulletin we ran 2 nights ago? Because I actually would have been lost and been, stumbling for the right words. So yes, I got through that. But here's something I did wrong as a young person. These 2 middle-aged men got me by the short and curlies. So they said to me, how much would you expect to earn? Okay, so as a 23-year-old who was just grateful to be in the room with these 2 guys who might have a job, I set it real low. So when I was in Masterton, this is 25 years ago, I think I was earning $20,000, which really was not much in those days. It was probably minimum wage. Yeah, but I was happy, and it was my first job out of journalism school. So I said, I would expect to earn $30,000. And I thought, oh my God, that's a big time. Anyway, when I left that interview, the guy who was the Christchurch bureau chief took me in the lift downstairs and he said, you should never have done that. He was very honest. He said, yes, you've got the job and we're paying you $30,000, but you should never do that because you're worth more than that. Yeah, but the cheeky bugger wasn't going to pay me more than that. But I'd gone down that path. So if someone says to you, that's my advice, and I've never, ever done it again, because even in contract negotiations, they will always say to you, what do you think you're worth? What do you think? So try and avoid answering that, because often you will undervalue yourself.
What do you say?
Well, I think sometimes you can go outlandish if you want to, and watch for their faces to go. That's one strategy, but that is a strategy. I mean, I'm not actually not saying that in jest. That is one way around it, and the other way is to find different words to describe what you might be worth. To say, well, I imagine that I think I'm probably worth more than you're offering. What are you offering? You turn it around. Turn it around. Because as soon as you give a figure, if it's less than what they actually might think they can get away with, they'll give you the figure you've asked for. And I think particularly as women, we do undervalue ourselves, and we're just grateful to get that job. But you're worth more. You're worth more. Yeah. Okay, right, sorry. What if I don't really believe in myself that I can do the job? Okay, well, I've never thought I can do the job, and I frequently don't think I can do the job. We all feel that way. And the thing is too, when you first go into a job, you won't know how to do that job. But you know what? You can learn how to do that job, and you can learn how to do it better than the person who went before you. So the fact that you've got an interview for a job means that they think you can do the job, or you wouldn't have got the interview. So block that out. Self-doubt is normal, but don't doubt that you can do the job, because you absolutely have. You wouldn't have got that far in the process. I mean, if you're looking through ads in the paper, then yeah, there will be jobs that we all look at and go, oh, that'd be interesting. Distribution manager, I'd like to do that. But clearly, I would not be able to do that. But once you've got in the door and you've got your interview and you've had people around you steering you in a particular direction, know that you are able to do that job. Okay. First impressions count. What do you want people to think of you? Yep, absolutely. And I think that we've covered that off in terms of presenting your best self. what do we want people to think of us? We want them to think of us as capable, and that comes with confidence, and that is something that we all have trouble developing, but at least for the purposes of a job interview, it's giving that impression that we are confident in ourselves, confident in who we are. Being a mother, how did you manage working and juggling, raising a family? With difficulty. Hands up the mums in the room who work as well. Yeah. Just the fact that they have a label for us, eh? Working mothers. Fathers are fathers who have jobs, but we're working mothers, you know? But it's hard. And a lot of women, I know friends of mine, they get really uptight about that word juggling, but it is. It actually is. And it's not easy. But I would say it's really worthwhile. And in the times when I've had self-doubt about I've missed something that the kids have been doing, or, you know, that childcare situation didn't work out and so-and-so's 12 and on their own for a few hours and that's not really right and da-la-la, you just kind of go, actually, in terms of the big picture, they're okay, I'm okay, and you're setting such a great example for your kids. I really do believe that. Like we've got boys and they're both, one's 18 and one's 16, so they're all grown up, one's left home already. And I look at them and I go, I'm glad they've had the example of a woman who was independent and sassy and strong and went out there and earned a living, and I hope they end up with women like that too, because I'm really glad that I kind of set that example for them, that they think that's normal and not abnormal. But this whole working mothers thing, we've got to ditch. We're mothers. You're a worker, you're a mother. You're a father, you're a worker, you know? Working mums, as if we're like this special category. But yeah, it ain't easy. Yeah. So the question is, how do I deal with sexism and ageism? So I've certainly had to deal with both. And if we look at sexism, it's probably during my career I felt sexism in terms of being, as a journalist, allocation of stories. That's a big one. So as a journalist, once you get into a bigger newsroom, you know, the tendency to send the women out on the light and fluffy stuff and give the blokes the big meaty stories. And, you know, I think that's probably improved over time, given that there are so many women in journalism now. So that's been helpful. But I've certainly felt it from time to time, where blokes get sent out the door on the meaty stories and you get to go and cover the Royal Tour or something like that. So I have had to stand up for myself in the workplace on that front, and it took some courage, because it does, you know, especially when you are doing a job that you love, you don't want to cause any grief for anyone. You know, you love the people you work with, you respect your boss, but situations arise where you go, actually, this isn't fair. How am I going to handle this? And so you forget about it, you move on, and then it becomes a pattern of behaviour, and you actually go, you know what, enough's enough, and I do need to address this. And it does take courage. And my advice, probably, if you find yourself in a situation like that, no matter what it is, whether it's sexism or ageism or any other type of discrimination, find yourself someone in your work environment who's more senior to you, who you respect and trust as a confidant, because they'll give you some good advice, and that's often a good first step. They can say to you, you know what, that concern is absolutely valid, and I'll help you and I'll support you. So as women in the workplace, I do think that's a really good first place to start. Ageism tends to be not so much from employers, but the public. So I get called an ugly old, again, there's lots of positive feedback, but past it, ugly old hag, you know, these sorts of, and again, don't feel sorry for me, because are they part of the 10 people whose opinion I care about? No. But these sorts of things where, you know, criticise the job I'm doing, not the way I look, you know, because I'm 48. I'm going to be around for a hell of a lot longer. I may not be on TV, but I'm going to be working till I'm at least 65. I love working. I love the stimulation. So these attitudes are out there where people, you know, we're all so dispensable. It's kind of like, oh, she's past it, get someone younger and get it. Well, that's fine, but you find someone younger to do any job, whether it's mine or yours, and they don't have your experience. They don't have your life skills. And when the shit hits the fan, they're going to freak out and possibly, you know, not be up to the task. So I think as a society, we all need to work hard on changing the attitudes, particularly around age. Certainly around women's representation in the workforce, but also about age, because we are all living longer. And the stories I hear from people who are over 50 and women trying to get jobs, I mean, it's criminal. It's absolutely criminal. You have such great work experience, such fantastic life experience. You've finished having kids, you know, those sexist employers who are going, I'm not going to hire her, she might leave me and have kids. Well, you're past that. You should be the prime candidate. Do you know what I mean? And yet so many women, excuse me, in that age bracket really, really struggle to find work. So I think as a whole, that's a big, big issue, but I think as a whole, we've all got to work together to fix that. And I think that is a case where if you go into a job interview and you are a parent who's returning to the workforce, you know, talk about the stuff that you've done at home, because you've been working. It's not a case of you've been sitting on the couch for the last 5 years. You've been working your ass off. So you make sure that you pass on what you've learned in that time. Time management, raising children, early education, all of these things are absolutely relevant to the job that you're looking for. I think what inspires me, particularly if I think of the journalism, is telling other people's stories. I love other people's stories. And there are some beautiful people in this country who are doing amazing things and no one's heard of them. And, you know, they're living in little towns and doing incredible things in the community. And they're the people who inspire me. I love nothing more than getting out, talking to people, meeting people, and getting to tell their stories. And so, yeah, that's what inspires me. Yeah. Plus, I love having fun. So I think when I was a kid, you know, I loved being on the stage and, you know, singing and acting and stuff like that. So I think there's a little bit of the performer in me too. So I get a bit of a kick out of that as well.
Any other questions?
This is not so much a question, but just to, going back to when you said about you listened to 10 people, and you listed your mother, your husband, your children. And I was just wanted to say that quite a lot of the women here probably have not had great, perhaps, upbringings or supportive people in their lives. So sometimes those voices are very loud still in their head.
Yeah.
So I think it's nice possibly to be aware of that and to try to tune those voices out.
Yes.
And
yeah.
work out
who your equivalent 10 are. And in many cases, as you say, it won't be your mother and it won't be your husband, because depending on your relationship with them, they may be the ones that are fueling that self-doubt. So be mindful of that, even though those were my 10, that's not going to fit with everybody. And maybe it's actually only 3 or 4 people. Do you know what I mean? It may not even be that many people, but keep in mind the people who've got you back, who know you, whose advice you can seek, and they will give you kind but honest advice. Because you don't want anyone just to say what you want to hear either. That's the thing. I mean, my mum, she'll tell me if I, but she'll do it in a kind way. Yeah. But that's a really, really good point. Yeah.
Yeah, any other questions? Well, we would like to thank you.
Oh, thank you so much.
Of Dress for Success.
sorry, I can't get up.
No, that's quite all right.
Oh, thank you
this is
so
for you,
much.
but
They're
thank
absolutely
you,
beautiful.
Thank you. It was wonderful, and let's give her a round of applause.
Oh, thank you.